The cruise ship was stranded in the Atlantic after a deadly outbreak of Hantavirus left 3 people dead, passengers locked in their cabins, and medical teams racing against time. This Tuesday, May 5th, 2026. The case has come to involve the WHO, Cape Verde, the Netherlands, Spain, South Africa, and the United Kingdom. Because the MV Rondios, a polar expedition vessel that departed from Ushuaia, Argentina, ended up stranded off the coast of Cape Verde without authorization to disembark. What started as a trip through remote areas of Antarctica and the South Atlantic Islands turned into a serious health crisis. With about 150 people on board and a troubling question hanging in the air, how did a rare virus, usually associated with rodents, end up on a vessel at sea? I'll tell you all about it in a moment, but right now, you'll want to be subscribed to the channel to stay well informed. Real-time information with the best journalistic quality ever seen in the standard of credibility, Milson Alves. The World Health Organization reported that the alert was received on May 2nd after severe cases of respiratory illness appeared on board the ship. As of May 4th, there were 7 confirmed or suspected cases with 2 laboratory confirmed cases, 5 still under investigation, 3 deaths, 1 patient in critical condition and 3 people with mild symptoms. The illness appeared between April 6th and 28th, starting with fever, headache, gastrointestinal symptoms, and fatigue. But in some cases it progressed to pneumonia, severe respiratory distress, and shock. The situation became more tense because the hantavirus does not have a specific treatment for the virus. What saves lives is quick medical care, oxygen, intensive care, and medical evacuation when the condition worsens. The MV Rondios is not a regular cruise ship for beaches and entertainment. It is used for expedition trips to remote regions, with routes that have included places like Antarctica, South Georgia, Nightingale Island, Tristan da Cunha, St. Helena, and Ascension. The vessel departed from Ushuaia on April 1st, carrying 88 passengers and 59 crew members, according to the WHO count. There were people from 23 nationalities on a trip sold as an extreme nature experience with bird watching, whale watching, and isolated landscapes. And that's exactly where the concern lies. Authorities are investigating whether the exposure happened before boarding, during the passage through Argentina, or on excursions in regions where birds and rodents coexist in natural environments. The first victims show how the crisis advanced silently. A 70-year-old Dutch man had a fever, headache, and mild diarrhea on April 6th. His condition quickly worsened, and he died on April 11th on board the ship. His 69-year-old wife also fell ill. She disembarked at St. Helena and was taken to Johannesburg, South Africa, but died on April 26th. Later, a British man developed a fever, shortness of breath, and signs of pneumonia. He was evacuated from Ascension and taken to an ICU in Johannesburg. On May 2nd, a German woman died on board after developing symptoms a few days earlier. 3 other suspected cases remained on the ship while medical teams began assessing the passengers and collecting samples. Cape Verde did not allow the passengers to disembark because the local risk needed to be controlled before any clearance. This decision left the ship in a kind of grim limbo, while at the same time increasing the pressure to evacuate the sick. The Netherlands started preparing to medically evacuate those in more serious condition. Meanwhile, the WHO stated that it was working with the ship's operator and the passengers' home countries to get everyone home safely. Spain also joined the discussion because the Canary Islands emerged as a possible destination for investigation, disinfection, and controlled disembarkation. But Spanish authorities said that the stopover might not be necessary if the sick passengers were removed in Cape Verde and no new cases appeared. The most sensitive point is the possible human-to-human transmission. The hantavirus is usually transmitted to people through contact with urine, feces, or saliva from infected rodents, especially when contaminated particles are inhaled in closed or dirty environments. But the WHO is considering the possibility that the variant involved is linked to the Andes virus, found in South America, which has already shown limited transmission among very close contacts. This doesn't mean it spreads easily, like the flu, but it changes the level of care inside the ship, especially among people who shared a cabin, lived closely together, or had prolonged contact with patients. The WHO itself maintains a low-risk assessment for the general public, but the low risk outside the ship does not reduce the urgency for those inside it. And that's when the case stops being just a news story about tourism and becomes a public health alert on an isolated vessel. Each decision needs to balance two things: protecting the population on land and quickly removing those who need hospital care. If the ship docks without control, a nation can create a new chain of exposure. If the response takes too long, sick passengers may miss the window for treatment. The investigation is still trying to determine where the virus entered, who had close contact with whom, and whether the first cases were infected before the trip or during stops in remote areas. History shows that this fear wasn't born just now. In January 2019, the WHO had already dealt with a Hantavirus outbreak in Argentina, in the province of Chubut, where an initial case was linked to environmental exposure and then to a chain of people who attended a social event. The investigation pointed to possible human-to-human transmission and several epidemiologically connected cases. In that alert, the WHO noted that hantavirus can cause a severe pulmonary syndrome with rapid progression to respiratory distress, and that the virus already had a history of limited person-to-person transmission. In Argentina, the MV Rondios therefore does not appear out of nowhere. It touches on a well-known issue in South America, where contact with rodent environments and human mobility can turn a rare exposure into an international crisis. Other nations have also learned the hard way that ships can become critical points when a disease appears in a closed environment. In 2020, the Diamond Princess was quarantined in Japan during the COVID crisis, with 712 positive tests among 3,711 passengers and crew members. According to the CDC report, the CDC also monitors outbreaks on cruise ships, especialmente gastrointestinais, because symptoms reported on board help quickly detect a threat and trigger control measures. The difference now is that the MV Rondios is not facing a common outbreak of gastroenteritis. It's facing a suspected hantavirus infection, a rare and serious disease with an investigation that is still incomplete. Now the next step is crucial. Remove the severe cases, test the suspected ones, identify the source of exposure, and determine where. The remaining passengers will be able to disembark safely. The operator Oceanwide Expeditions, the WHO, and authorities from several nations are trying to coordinate a solution that doesn't turn fear into chaos or caution into abandonment. The ship remains a symbol of a crisis that is simple to understand but difficult to resolve. 3 people have died and others have fallen ill. Passengers are waiting in quarantine, and the world is trying to figure out how a rare virus got onto an expedition trip and forced an entire cruise to stop off the African coast. I'm Milson Alves, a specialist in international relations, and my goal is to keep you accurately informed every day. The news links are in the video description. Leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and at the end, check out the comments so you can be even more engaged with the community. Milson Alves.